Hey everyone! Thank you for joining us today at the first episode of the SpeechBubble Spotlight series, in which we'll be spotlighting and interviewing various WIDPSC competitors and coaches from a variety of national teams. And so our first episode today, let me just let people in, will be on debate in general, and we're so honored to be here with Caridee Chau, who is a two-time WIDPSC Parliamentary Debate Champion. Caridee, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Caridee. Um, I just graduated high school, and I don't think there's anything I can say right now that the poster does not say because the people who made the poster did a very good job. But basically, I am going to be studying in the UK, and I'm very happy to be here.
Yay, okay. Essentially what we're going to be doing today is we'll introduce briefly to the category for any newcomers or first timers, and then we'll dive into a few sections of questions, different questions, and we'll have a Q&A time at the end for you guys. Of course, if you guys have questions during the webinar, in fact, I don't know if the function is enabled, but if you have any questions, just drop it in the chat, and I guess Charity could also answer live. It would be a bit more interactive. Yeah, so just a brief introduction to the category. Parliamentary debate in WIDPSC is 2v2 debating, in which each competitor is paired together with a partner from another school or another country, and you get 30 minutes of prep time. One team gets to choose the motion out of three kind of different motions, and one team chooses the side. And 10 minutes-ish into prep time, proposition must reveal the definition of the motion, and they must reach a consensus before they begin prepping. In terms of speaker positions, the first speaker on each side will have a 6-minute initial speech and a 3-minute rebuttal as a third speech. And the second speaker on each side will have a single 9-minute speech in which they can first rebut and then present more extension arguments. And points of information are allowed at like dedicated times. So, does anyone have any questions in regards to like the basics of the category? Okay, moving on then. We're gonna enter our little interview section. So let's begin with a little bit of like introduction and background. So, Charity, what was your first ever debate experience like?
My first ever debate, I remember I was in eighth grade and it was like for a class assignment and I was so petrified because I just hated like presentations and everything. I just thought I would make like a huge buffoon out of myself, but it ended up being actually really fun, especially because I remember the people on the other side were kind of annoying me, so that made it more fun for me. Yeah, so basically I got into debate because I just I just felt like you get to speak uninterrupted for the most part, and you get to sort of put your opinions aside and give your 2 cents on all sorts of different issues. And I thought that was just really fun.
Yeah, that's very valid. Then I'm curious, like, what is your most memorable debate round you've ever been a part of and why?
Ooh, ooh, I think my most memorable debate round would be uh there was this one round online. I forgot what competition it was from, but I remember we were so this is back when COVID was still a thing. Because I'm really old and I was debating during COVID. Um and I just remember while the judge went into like another breakout room to talk to the other person on the panel, I remember we were all like talking in the Zoom chat. And so during the debate, we were talking about this motion about bullying. And we just started sort of almost just trauma dumping in the chat low key, but and we really bonded. And the other team was from Scotland. And I think at that moment I realized that debate is like, I think on the surface it's very easy to say debate is just like it's literally about disagreeing, but I think it's so much more than that. I think that was really memorable for me. One, because I think we realized that the emotions we were debating weren't just sort of like, placeholders and like random topics. They're actually very real issues that could affect real people. But secondly, also that like the disagreement that debate sort of puts into the center
Mhm.
um, sort of also helps us look past our personal disagreements. So I found a lot of like philosophical
Yeah.
depth in that moment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that was really well said. What's the best piece of like general debate advice you've ever received from a coach or teammate? Like best of all time.
Oh, best of all time. Okay, this is kind of cheating, but I think I will give two. So the first one is like fake it till you make it. There's so many times I've stepped into a debate with zero clue what the emotion was about, zero clue what was going on, and I hadn't like, touched a news headline for weeks. Um, and also there's POIs, right? Sometimes you'll just not know what's going on. And I think in those instances, I think my coach told me you just have to assume nobody knows what's going on. Everyone's just doing their best. So it's okay to just like say the most of what you can say. And I really think that's so true because like confidence almost means more than the things you say, especially in like WIDPSC where it's a very speech heavy event and lots of people are very good at presenting themselves. I think that just being able to brainwash yourself into believing that you know what you're talking about, even if you don't, super important. And the second thing is there was this coach, and this is back when I was pretty new to debate, that was asking me why I was so worried about writing. Because this was back when I would literally script my entire speech word for word on the piece of paper in front of me. And I just told her, well, I am worried that I won't have enough to say. But then she told me something I thought was very, very um just like really thoughtful. And it was that she said, I would rather have a responsive speech, like that listens to the things other people say and actually engages with it than like a long speech that doesn't really interact with the things other people are saying. So that made me realize that actually like I'm spending so much time worrying about whether or not I can hit like 8 minutes, which was the max in the format that I was doing, that I wasn't actually listening. And because of that, my rebuttals weren't like as good as they could be. So I think that was really good advice. Like always choose an engaging speech over like a longer and more flowery speech.
Wow, yeah, for sure. We're gonna move into the more like pre-competition and in-round prep that you might be doing. So I think my first question would be like, how do you typically, or if you do at all, but how do you typically prepare prior to a debate competition or tournament?
Um, so definitely have like a hype playlist. I've like a hype playlist of songs that make me feel really good about myself. I think that is really important. Like don't psych yourself out. Don't overthink it because I'm like sure everyone who's really really, interested in debate and like participates in like speech bubble events and things like that is the type of person who would practice and have like, some experience or care about the event. I think if you're that type of person, then you have nothing to worry about because at that point, like muscle memory will kick in if you don't like let your nerves get in the way. So I think definitely hype playlist. Talk to your teammates, talk to your coach if it makes you feel better. And also like spend time alone if that's what helps you. Cause it really depends on the round and it depends on how you're feeling that day. I think yeah, so definitely take care of yourself and your like emotions. Don't try to overthink it. The stakes are really not that high. Nobody is going to like, remember this round forever. That is what I tell myself because I think my top worry is always that I'm going to say something embarrassing and everyone's going to just like remember that as my slogan. And I don't want that to happen. Yeah. And I think in terms of like content preparation and skills preparation, I think something I like to do is watch like recordings of um like there's a format of debate called World Schools. And so for that event, it's like solely about debate and it's like not that much about the speaking style. I would watch that to sort of specifically target like the depth of the thought that I'm having. And then I would also separately watch purely speeches, purely speeches. So I would like sort of separate my training for like the rebuttals and like the thinking that I'm doing and the content and the style. And then I would like combine it after that, if that makes sense. So I would like target each one and then do it together.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting approach because it makes sure that you can kind of like hone every skill from like delivery to argumentation and rebuttal generation. So, how about like during a typical preparation process during like debate prep time? How do you allocate your time? Can you walk us through your typical process?
Mhm. For this format, I think I forgot if it's like it's somewhere around 30 minutes, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. But I would just like talk to my teammate beforehand, of course, because in this format, you are assigned a teammate, usually from another team that you haven't spoken to before. So definitely get to know them a little bit so you're not like, awkward when prep starts. And like usually I would ask for around like 3 to 5 minutes of silent prep time so you can um just soak in the topic and have some time to think to yourself and then share your thoughts. Yeah, and deciding speaker order is a separate thing, but especially in this format, I would say that like don't let it eat up too much of your prep time because there's a point where getting the speaker position that you want is going to be less important than like the amount of time that you spend in prep deciding the speaker position. So like be very aware of when in time that point is for you and how important it is for you to get like one specific speaker position. I would say also be like, well, this is like sort of this is a thing I like to do, and it's just pretend you're on the other side of the motion as well, especially if you are a second speaker. But I think also if you are a first speaker, even if you're just talking about arguments and you're thinking those through, I think it's helpful to have the other side's perspective, just so you don't get any like POIs that get you off guard. I like to prep at least one POI using my prep time or like using the time when I'm walking from the table to like the debate room and I can't really get myself to form any other coherent thoughts, then I'll just like prep a POI just to use that time to its fullest. I think in terms of the middle chunk of time where you're thinking of arguments, the most important thing is to think of like what are the most important values in this debate and then shape your argument building around that rather than just trying to generate as many arguments as possible. And also read every single word of the topic or the motion because there's sometimes when just like one word completely changes the meaning of the debate. Like I remember there was one round I was a part of where it was like this house regrets the rise of something, and because we didn't pick up on the fact that it was the rise, I think we missed out on a lot of like cool arguments that could have been more specific, could have been more impactful. So yeah, I would say in general, just try to think of different sides of the motion, try to prep at least one point, and then in terms of arguments, shape them around like the important issues of the debate rather than just trying to come up with like different taglines.
Yeah. I think you covered it pretty comprehensively, but we're going to ask you if there's anything that you do in prep time that you think no one else does or that most people overlook.
Ooh, hmm. I do think it's that POI thing because I feel like I feel like cause so okay, so basically at 1 minute, the judge will like hit the table to signal to you that it is now allowed you're now allowed to give points of information. And I feel like it's just such a cool thing to do. Like the second they hit the table, you stand up, then like I think that's a sign of dominance. That's a there's no better way to put it. That is a sign of dominance in the debate that you like know what you're doing. And I also think it makes you feel more confident. I don't know what it is about like standing up, but I feel like when I'm sitting down, um I feel like if you stand up, if you get that moment and that also makes you feel better. That also kind of psychs you up for your own speech. Yeah. I think that's like my That's like my favorite little thing that I think I specifically think to do that I don't think like other people have done in the rounds that I've been in before.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, for sure. I don't think I've ever prepped a PO. I probably should start doing that. That might be helpful, but yeah, definitely consider that. Use that as food for thought that during your last minute of prep time when you're walking to the debating table or podium or whatever and you have nothing to do, then maybe just use that time to think of a POI. Okay, moving on to argument generation. So, what are your top tips for creating strong and original extensions? For example, if you're speaking second, while maintaining cohesiveness with your team's case.
Mm-hmm. For second, I would say usually I think the way people think about like an extension is that you have to make like a new argument. But I don't think that's true 100% of the time because sometimes in a debate there are only like two or three good lines that you can give. And then if you try to make like a separate argument just for the sake of making an argument, then you tend to come off as like having the less important argument because like the more important issues have already been brought up by the first speaker. So what I like to do is when I speak second, I like to do just like a lot of responsive work just because I don't think the first speaker really has any time for that. And also, I think definitely have like a moment or two where you explicitly reference like okay like and this is how they tried to rebut my partner. Here's where I'm going to defend my partner. I think like doing that also is really good for teamwork. And I think something that's not just good for like teamwork points, but just good for your morale in general is to like, when your partner gets down, like tell them they did a good job and like, high five them, things like that. And it's like, it's not just for appearances. I think it genuinely helps your cohesiveness with your partner because in this format it's like a sandwich, right? The first speaker speaks first and then second speaker and then the first speaker speaks again to sort of wrap it all up. I think by the end of all that you're probably going to be a little bit tired, so I do think those small gestures actually mean a lot. Yeah, but back to argument generation. I would say if you're really struggling to come up with new ideas, I think you can try to impact your partner's argument more. You can try to like express the idea of it in a deeper way, right? So maybe if your partner gave a lot of different and very smart reasons, but they didn't maybe illustrate it as well, you can give like a very moving, imagine if you were blah 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 type of thing. Or if they did the emotional work, then maybe you want to come in with the logic. And then the thing that you can do after that, because you have 9 whole entire minutes, is you can also tell the judge why what you said is important. So that's like a skill that one of my coaches taught me. It's called meta debating. It's like you are telling the judge like basically why what you're saying matters in terms of how they should judge the debate and not just why it is important in the world in general. So, for example, if you prove that the opponents have a contradiction, don't just stop there. Just also say because they have two like conflicting lines, that means that they cannot have both of those impacts. And then you can say why like those impacts on their own are weaker than what you have because what you have is cohesive and does not like contradict at any point, for example.
Yeah. How about when you receive a motion that you know less about? How would you approach that kind of situation?
I think during the first few minutes of prep, I would start thinking about like what do I already know about this motion? And since you don't really know your partner, I think it's like it's totally okay to be open with them and say, "Hey, I'm not as experienced on this topic, so I was wondering if you know anything about this." And I think they're like they're going to be happy to help you because it's also, good for them to have like a partner that's like that knows what's going on. I think when you get a topic that you don't know much about, you're naturally going to give less examples. And that is okay because examples don't always have to be in real life. Like you don't always have to say, oh, like this thing happened 2 months ago in this place. You can also give like I said earlier, you can also give anecdotes, right? So if you have the rough spirit of what the topic is going for, instead of maybe making it like a very specific IR example, you can talk about imagine you are like a civilian on the ground, and then you paint a picture of what that is to sort of give the illusion that you know the specifics, even though you might not actually know the exact details. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you have any strategies for like for refutation specifically in terms of like generating rebuttals or POIs?
Mm-hmm. The first thing in terms of generating rebuttals is I would say you need to ask yourself what is it about the arguments of the opponent that sort of like threatens your case the most? Because sometimes it doesn't, right? Sometimes it actually helps you. In that case, you don't need to go through all the work of being like, this is not true, and this is not likely, and this is not going to happen. You don't need to do that. You just need to say, look, they said this, and we agree, and then spend the rest of the time making it really clear why it helps you. Um, yeah, and another thing I would say is like be be clear. So if there's one broad thing that is wrong with the other side, and not just like a specific line by line rebuttal, or not just like a specific example that they got wrong, but one broad thing that they got wrong, you're going to want to bring it back like two or three times in your speech, just so that when the judge is checking their notes, if there's one bullet point that they write for your speech, like as a rebuttal against that side, that would be like the broad thing they note down. Because actually sometimes you hear like a specific nitpick that the opponent maybe has about you. Maybe you got an example like slightly wrong, and they're like saying, oh, they got the country wrong or something like that, and you're going to feel the need to clarify. But honestly, at the end of the day, at the end of the debate, the judge is not going to remember that, and that they're not likely to just pick that out of their notes and say that is what loses or wins someone the debate. So pick the broad things that they get wrong. Maybe it's that they don't like do a lot of reasoning to prove why something is true, or maybe it's that a lot of the things they say aren't really unique. But if there's like a broad thing, make sure that just your rebuttals are targeted toward that one like strategic flaw.
Yeah, good advice. Okay. Um, we will move on to, sorry, the more delivery slash debate part of this. Um, so I think something that a lot of people are curious about is how to find or like choose the speaker role that kind of suits you more. And obviously you won't get like your top choice every time, but what about for you? Which speaker role do you think suits you best and why?
Hmm. That's actually a really, really good question, because I think at first I thought that first speaker suited me more, so I would just like only do first speaker. But um, uh, through the years, I realized that I actually like the second speaker more. I think just because I'm a very, as you can probably tell from this, I'm like a very wordy person. I like my words, so I need like a lot of time. And I think like 9 minutes for me is an advantage because it's like one stretch of time where you don't have to be interrupted. And that's just where I can like give like a lot of different reasons and things like that. The challenge with that, of course, is like keeping people interested and making sure you're not like repeating yourself. Um, yeah, so I would say that second speaker suits me more, but if you're trying to choose a speaker role that suits you better, I would say if you're more of like a person who shines in terms of rebuttals, then second speaker is definitely the way to go. But if your argumentation is really strong, right? If you're someone who like reads a lot of the news, so you have like a lot of good examples to give, and you are like a very powerful rhetoric person, I think it would be really the advantage of first speaker is that you get to go like first and last. So you make the strongest initial impression. So if you can really pull through with those things, and then your arguments are like important enough that you're not just relying on your delivery, then I think that's the speaker role for you. And if you're more responsive, then like second, I think works better.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Um, I think because some of our younger audiences or first timers are might be more used to WSDC debating. So what would you say are the like the biggest differences between that format and WIDPSC debate? And like what would you need to do more or less of when delivering a WIDPSC speech?
Mm, I think in WSDC, it's way more sort of it's way more okay to just like stutter or suddenly slip up or just like I'm going to be a little controversial here. I think it's more accepted to be even like a little bit rude in WSDC format. Like there have been debates where people literally just like talk over each other when they like don't take their POIs and things like that. But that behavior is not like extremely rare in WSDC tournaments, especially like more casual ones. I would say in WIDPSC, it's like far more important that you have like good manner and good delivery. That is like the top difference that I would note. And I also think that WSDC is like far more heavy on the reasoning. And because speeches are longer and because speeches are 8 minutes and because there are also like more exchanges, it is also heavier on like rebutting and rebuilding everything and on the responses. Whereas I think for WIDPSC debating, it's more about like being generally persuasive, and not necessarily like about like every single like logical resolution between the two sides. So I think those are the primary differences that I've noticed.
Yeah. Um, in your opinion, then, what would be the ideal like ratio between content, strategy, and style when delivering a with PISC style speech?
I think okay. I think strategy is like strategy is something that can go into that can be sort of included within your content and your style. So, for example, if you know that you have an audience, you might want to be like more charismatic because like the energy of the audience also like sort of feeds into how you feel and how like the entire room feels about certain things. Whereas if you are like in a prelim round and there are no observers, you might want to just like address the judges like more directly. Things like that, I think for strategy sort of are included within your style and your delivery and also your content as well. I would say the ratio between your content and your style. Um, the thing is, I think there's like a baseline level for both. I think there's like a baseline level of content that you know yourself as a debater, you'll always hit like this amount of arguments. And there's like a baseline level of like style where even if you focus entirely on content, you can hit that because you know you maybe have experience in like other events and things like that. So I would say the right ratio would be actually depending on your opponents. I
Mm.
would say like because if everyone in the room is like really 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 good at logic, I think you would want to make yourself stand out by maybe having like a more stylistic approach because people have probably said like similar things and similar rebuttals. At the same time, if you think that like you can pull off, like in a room where everyone is maybe super like experienced in debate, if you can pull off just being like the knight in shining armor that can, outweigh everything, I think that has its own merits. I think it all depends on just like how you feel, but as like a rule of thumb, I would say have enough style, um, like to the point where you sound like you're giving an impromptu speech, if that makes sense,
Yeah.
where you're still doing like some gestures and your voice still has some fluctuation in it, but also have enough content that when the judge looks back at what you said, they can put like two rows of bullets, if that makes sense. Like they will have like one main bullet, and then you would have said enough that there would be sub bullets under like one argument. And I think that would be like the rule to go by.
Mm. How about on like more of a mental side of things? Like, how do you deal with nerves? Because obviously, speaking at the grand finals in front of every single delegation is not an easy task. So how do you deal with that? Because I mean, I wouldn't believe you if you said you're not nervous at all, right?
Yeah, that's definitely not true. I was super nervous. I think the thing is I think honestly, it does come with like time and like maturity as well. I remember in 2023 when I was in the grand final and I lost, I just like was super, super nervous because that was also my first time in front of like a really big in-person audience. I think like the difference is sort of like grounding yourself and thinking about like what this round means to you. Because I think in 2023, I was way too focused on wanting to win. But of course, you're still going to want to win. But in like more recent years, I think something that really helped with my nerves is just like knowing that, you know, like you've already made it far enough to have an audience and you should like that in and of itself is something to be proud of. Also that you have trained, you have prepared, right? Or that you care enough to be nervous. And that is like a sign that you can like make it through this. Um, and something else is that because 2025 was my last year debating as like a high schooler, so I was really like, wow, you know, this is probably my last opportunity to speak to a lot of people. So I want to make it count. So the thing that I did was like, I wrote in even just like a few jokes just to get like a reaction out of the audience. And that also made me feel a lot better. Um, yeah, but I think it's all about like your mindset of what you want out of the round. Even if you like really, really want to win, which like is like just of course super valid because who doesn't want to win, right? Um, just try and put that aside for the moment. Uh, and just like imagine that you're just doing what you've always done just in front of more people. And most of the time, you will see familiar faces in the audience, and it helps to also focus on them at certain times.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Then moving on to the most anticipated moment of the night, we're going to be looking at Caridee's 2025 debate speech from this year. Yeah, but I think it'd be better if you guys gave us like some context because we're not able to watch the entire debate, but some context on what's been going on so far in the debate before you stepped in.
Okay. So, the debate, firstly, I want to touch back down on the nerves thing because oh my God, nobody told me that we were going to be randomly drawing our partners out of a bag. So it was like something out of the Hunger Games. I was freaking out because we did not do this for any other round. Um, yeah, but anyways, the motion, as you can see, is like this house believes that the university degree is obsolete. And I think immediately it was clear that there was going to be like a definition a definition squabble because okay, let me give you the behind the scenes tea. So prop um I was on op and prop wanted to talk about how like obsolete just means not serving its original purpose. But then me and my partner on op, we didn't really want to debate that because then we thought the whole debate is going to turn into what is the original purpose of a university degree. And but in the end, we decided, you know what, it would be unfair if we settled on a definition that meant like obsolete equals like zero people do it anymore because that's like clearly not true. So we weren't going to say that. So we decided to go with no longer serving its original purpose. And yeah, so that's what happened during prep. And I do think that still happened during the debate. But on top, basically, their first speaker says that well, the burden is to prove that the degree does not serve its original purpose. And then they start talking about class mobility. So they talk about how, you know, recently it's really hard to get into a good university. It's really selective. And that's like something that leads to it being very difficult for people to get jobs. They talk about how it's sort of almost like a thing that employers require. So then that's like unfair to people who maybe whose circumstances sort of like preclude them from being able to get access to a university degree. And then my partner talks about how basically my partner used like a kind of funny analogy about how if you use like a microphone to massage yourself, that would not mean that the microphone is obsolete because it's like still there. And then my partner talked about how the purpose of university is sort of like to specifically study something that you really love and to sort of foster your knowledge on that. Yeah, and then the second prop speaker then talks about how if the like sort of if the function of something evolves, then it also evolves. So it's not what it originally was. So like by virtue of that, university degrees are obsolete. And they also talk about how like university admissions sort of makes people really like pretentious and makes teenagers like choose things that they don't like that like don't actually fall in line with their personal interests. And so after that is my speech. And at this point, I am a little bit like a little bit confused on whether I should continue pushing for the definition thing. So I just talk about how the inaccessibility thing is firstly not true because there are programs in place like, you know, affirmative action and things like financial aid programs that are specifically dedicated to helping people get in. And actually that universities were way more elitist before. So actually it's getting better now. And I also just talk about how the entire argument that it is a bad thing that people can't get a university degree kind of inherently suggests that getting a university degree is like a good thing and not obsolete. And those are like the main things I said.
Yeah, okay. No more spoilers. We're going to go into the video, and I think I'm gonna pause it like maybe 2 or 3 times just to ask you like kind of what was going through your mind at that time. But yeah, this is a very nerve-wracking setup of the debate. What's the timestamp? Okay. It was around. Oh, okay. We're gonna give you a couple seconds. Okay, can you guys hear that? Apologize again. Many. Wait, sorry. Can you guys hear her talk? Okay. Here in this room, and all of us seniors here in this debate today are going to college this fall. Yet, many of us don't actually know what we want to do in life yet. That we do know for certain is that we are going to college for a reason. We are going to college because we want to study something that we're interested in for 4 years. We're going to college because we know that it provides us something of value. Judges, a college degree is many things, but it is not obsolete. We're very proud to oppose. A few things in this speech. First, I want to give a clarification before moving on to rebuttals. Then I want to talk about the broad issue in this debate of what exactly the importance of a college degree is. But first, I want to make one key clarification, which is that side proposition has an exceptionally high burden today in this debate. Because the motion reads, this House believes that the university degree is obsolete. And this means 3 things. First, that the debate is about whether the degree is or is not obsolete, not whether it should or should not be. So however unfair the university application process is, that does not have anything to do with whether or not a college degree in and of itself actually matters. Therefore, even if we take them at their very best case in which their argument about social mobility and unfairness is true, it still does not gain them any ground in this debate. The second thing here is that this debate is also not about whether or not the degree is becoming obsolete or trending toward being obsolete. It is about whether or not the degree is or is not obsolete right now in this present moment. I would urge you to look toward your intuition. The fact that people literally are willing to go into debt to go to university symbolizes just how important the degree is. And later I'll point out how there was an extremely big contradiction within the proposition case that also gives us this point. But
thirdly, we think that obsolescence is symbolized not just by the virtue of a few or no thank you, a few exceptions not being able to complete the purpose of a college degree. That is to say, we can prove to you that in general, people do get the purpose of a college degree out of it. Even if they say that in the vast minority of cases, some people are dissatisfied with their college degree, or some people they don't have a purpose out of it. We say that this is not grounds upon which to say that the college degree as a whole is obsolete. Before I move on, I'll take that point. How does your side respond to the fact that both rich and poor people get useless degrees just to be able to enter the job market? That question is hinged upon the assumption that
Okay, just before we continue with her response, I just want to know, like, given that this debate was mostly like kind of a you're wrong, I'm right, one with a characterization, were you afraid that the judges would like already have bought props characterization, and how did you handle that?
I think yeah, definitely, because I was up second. So there had already been three speeches worth of material before mine. So I was thinking about like assuming the worst case that the judges have already bought their like their characterization. How can I still sort of like flip this debate to our side? So I think it's always good to do this thing called like even if. So I said like, look, even if like their framing is right, then I like still rebutted the things about how, you know, it's hard for like people from it's hard for people who are not like super rich to do very well in like the admissions process and things like that. So I think always like you it's okay to say their framing is not true, but then also engage in like the okay, look, even if their framing is true, like we still win because blah blah blah, because you never know what the judges what's going through their minds. I was trying so hard to read their minds and I could not. So yeah.
Yeah, okay. We'll go on to her response to that PO event.
It's just being into the job market. That question is hinged upon the assumption that the degree is useless. Which note, it's something that psychology still hasn't been able to prove to you as of this moment, even after their two substantive speeches. They told you why it was hard to get a degree. They told you why it's unfair in the process of getting a degree, but never did they prove to you that having a degree in and of itself is useless, which is why they never really answered that part of this motion, even if you take all their arguments to be true. Moving on to my rebuttals then. The first thing I want to rebut here is the saying about class mobility. Side proposition talks about how there are very high barriers to access, about how it's very hard to get into college, and therefore that means that like college degrees aren't accomplishing their purpose. First, I just want to point out to you that this is blatantly untrue. There are tons of community colleges which are literally dedicated to lifting people up who are unable to pay for exorbitant tuition fees. Or, for example, there are tons of financial aid initiatives ongoing, even at the very most elitist universities, like the Ivy Leagues, for example, that are literally designed to allow people from the lower echelons of society to achieve social mobility. It is just inherently untrue that college admissions in and of itself is an entirely unfair process. That is enough to say that the college lobby is entirely obsolete. No, thank you. But secondly, how difficult it is to get a degree has nothing to do with how meaningful that degree is. For example, it is very hard for some people to apply for welfare because of all the paperwork and all the proof they have to provide. Even though it was meant to promote social mobility, that doesn't make it obsolete because it still accomplishes its purpose of helping people. Yesterday's dinner buffet line was very, very long. I had to wait very long to get pizza. That does not mean that the purpose of that pizza was obsolete because I still got to eat it. But finally, I just like to note that like social mobility is not the entire purpose of a degree. We go to college for more reasons than just our income. A lot of us apply to the colleges that we want, not just because they have the highest average salary rate, but because those places fit our needs as students, and because those places give us the resources we need to study the things that we like. This is a facet of college and the college degree and what it symbolizes that side proposition has entirely ignored. And this is extremely crucial because college is way more than social mobility. Now, the second thing I want to rebut is this thing about job scarcity. And here's what I want to flag a huge contradiction that was made on their side. They argue that employers use a degree as a differentiator, and therefore this makes social class divides worse because applying to college is hard. But judges, this is an argument that helps our side because it actually relies on the assumption that the degree is a very, very helpful indicator to employers. It relies on the assumption that a college degree is very, very meaningful to employers and therefore not obsolete. Therefore, they have spent an entire few minutes of their speech arguing in something that gives us like a leg up in this debate. But secondly, this argument did going through that, no thank you. The absence of a degree doesn't mean anything. They never said anything about why the presence of a degree doesn't mean anything. They just said that just because you don't have a degree doesn't mean you're unqualified. That says nothing about the people who do have a degree, and therefore that says nothing about whether or not a college degree is meaningful.
Okay, we're gonna pause it here because I just want to ask you, like, how do you tend to structure your notes or structure your thoughts to create such like clear and layered refutations to each point?
For rebuttal specifically, what I do is I take the A4 paper and I fold it in half. So on this side, I like write down what they're saying, and on the side on the right, I like write bullets for my my rebuttals so that like you can save yourself a lot of time during the debate. You don't have to like copy your notes for what they said onto your papers because so it's already there. And I think it also makes it easier to follow. Because like, you know, sometimes when you have like a lot of notes, you'll be talking and then you'll look back down on your paper and then you'll not know where you were. And that's like my worst nightmare. So I find that having it divided like that helps me track a little bit easier. In terms of like writing down the rebuttals, I'll always start with why it's not true and then go on to why it's like not important, even if it is true. I think that's just like I just like doing it like that because I think you start off with like the more extreme side and then you like sort of take a step back and say, look, like even if they're right, we're still right. So yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thirdly and finally, people still go to college. Like people still seek a degree if you just use your basic intuition. And that in and of itself tells you how important and how crucial, on top of side proposition's own argumentation, the college degree is. But finally, I want to address this argument that came out of the second proposition speech about how we turn teens into brands. I'd like to say, no thank you. Firstly, that university admissions literally look out for these things. They're literally like admissions officers training programs that are designed to weed out people who are being very pretentious, and they actively seek people who have authenticity and authentic personalities. Secondly, if they're talking about how something forces people to put up a facade, the same thing is true for like job applications. The same thing is true for debate when we put up a facade and being very knowledgeable, etc., etc. There are lots of things that require you to put up a facade. That does not make them obsolete. The problem with all of side propositions arguments at large is that firstly, a lot of them are just factually not true. Social mobility does happen in college. But secondly, all of their arguments are not about the degree itself or even its meaning. They're about the process of applying for it, or like general social issues that exist regardless of whether or not there is a degree. That is why we win today's debate. But finally, I want to talk about what the actual importance of a college degree is, because I think this is something that needs to be reiterated and made clear. Side proposition would like you to believe that a degree is meaningless just because it does not allow everyone to, for example, become richer. But this would a person who spent like 12 years on 3 humanities degrees will be very sad. I'm very sorry about David. But let's compare impacts here, right? I think the importance of a college degree is far, far more than just social mobility, which we already told you that it does achieve. It is also about things like, for example, the fact that on campus, you get to meet a lot of people from all around the world and that this is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. The degree is not just a piece of paper. It symbolizes the fact that you put in 4 years of your life studying and researching and like going into specialized lectures for an issue that you actually very care about. It is symbolic of your knowledge and it is symbolic of an experience that is irreplaceable. And that is why the vast majority of us in this room are not just going to go straight from high school to applying for a job, because we understand that the college degree is not obsolete. So at the end of the day, When we compare impacts here, their arguments were vastly irrelevant to the heart of emotion, but we told you not only why a college degree was significant, but also why it is still very, very relevant and very, very crucial. The college degree can be hard to get. The college degree can be a very harrowing process. The college degree can involve a lot of drinking frat parties and things like that my partner touched on about. And one thing is very, very clear. The college degree is, never was, and never will be obsolete. Thank you.
Wow, yeah, okay. Um, so actually something that I wanted to ask you because I was able to witness this like in person, right? But your first speaker came up and he was like a very like he had a lot of rhetoric, he had a lot of humor, and he was just like very unique in a sense. Like, so how were you able to differentiate yourself as second speaker from your first?
Mm, I think the first thing is that like there were a lot of rebuttals that I think my partner sort of like sacrificed because like for the sake of having like good style. And in prep I was like really concerned about him actually because like he barely wrote down any notes. So he was probably just really good, a really good impromptu speaker, and he was like, "Oh, this is just how I prep." So I was like, "Okay, I think like he's probably not going to keep track of everything as closely because he's not that much of a note taker." And I think for the sake of the debate, by the time his speech was over, I was like, okay, I have to respond to this framing thing. Otherwise, this debate's going to be really confusing. So I think that's one. And secondly, I think everyone has like a really unique style. So even though his delivery was like really, really friendly, really unique and things like that, I think I like sort of thrive on being a little bit aggressive at times in terms of my delivery and then like pulling back and having some rhetoric. So I just think that inherently because our styles were very different, I wasn't really worried about I wasn't so much worried about like, seeming like appealing to the audience as I was about the whole definition clash.
Okay. Before we move on to Q&As, we just want to ask you like what's one motion that perhaps you hope you never have to debate again?
Oh, that's such a good question. And there are so many answers, but I think I would have to say, let me think. Um, oh, there was a motion I think a few years ago that was about um I don't remember the specific wording, but it was like something something is always harmful or like is always something like that. And I just think when you see words like always and never in emotion, I pray that like nobody else ever has to go through that because I think that pushes you to defend like the other team can be like, oh, like what about this one edge case where like a lot of unlikely things happen, but that is still a case and you still have to defend that. So that like again, sort of goes back to the thing about how like you should read the motion very, very carefully because like just one word, right? If something is like if you change more harm than good to like always harmful or something like that, that just messes everything up so bad. But in terms of like motions, I think like I do not like debating motions about sports. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so you're going off to college like very, very soon. So finally, like we just want to know what's next for you in debate. Like, are you going to continue? And if so, how?
I definitely see myself continuing to debate. I I don't think I'm going to be as active as I was before. I'm very likely to be at next year's WIDPSC actually, because it is very close to where I go to college, and I'm still, in touch with all my coaches from Team China, and they are on board with it. So that is something that I'm looking forward to. And oh, by the way, I will be there like as like a judge or like a coach and not as a competitor because like I've already graduated. But other than that, I think I would like to, sort of explore the debate union in university and just like see what options there are. I just want to try it out, because as I said in that speech, that's what college is for.
Yeah, okay. Moving on to our last, portion of the night, we're gonna host our little Q&A. So if any of you have any questions, you could either speak up or just type it in the chat and we'll read it out loud. So, use this time and ask any questions that you might have for Caridee before we log off. Okay. Oh, a few of you have raised hands. I'm just gonna go and Harjan.
Uh, yeah. So, I went as well to WIDPSC, but not much success as well. 'Cause I was kind of in over my head. But you're someone who's been really successful throughout all the years that you've competed at the tournament itself. So I was just wondering, what did you do during, in middle school and early high school to prepare for the tournament itself, and how'd you set yourself up for success?
Oh, firstly, thank you so much. And uh, I think one thing that I did was okay. I think so. I started debate in eighth grade, but before that, I think one habit that really, really helped me sort of get my critical thinking skills up and rehearse them a little bit and sort of like be like sharp and be able to respond on my toes is just like I think forcing myself to like be in situations where I would have to respond to things like without being able to rely on a script. So I think I would do a lot of stuff emceeing for events and things like that, or my school really wanted me to do things where like new incoming students' parents were asking me questions about the school. So I think put yourself in situations where people ask you a lot of questions, because that really helps with just like the speed of like your thinking and a lot of the times it doesn't even have to be about stuff you don't know because it's also surprisingly really hard to answer questions about things that you know as well.
Yeah, okay. I hope that answered your question. We'll just go then in the order of the chat because we got one a few minutes ago. But starting with Caitlin, who asked, how do you avoid being overly repetitive, especially as second speaker?
I think one thing you can do is if you have new material that's like not going to be repetitive. So I'm assuming you're talking about things like extensions, stuff like that. You can I think phrasing and like semantics also really helps. So if they use very clear taglines, oftentimes when people argue or make like an argument, not argue, sorry, there are going to be a few words that really stick out to you and you really remember. So that can come out to you when you're like taking notes on even your own partner's arguments. Try to avoid those words that they've repeated like two or three times already. Use like a synonym for that. Even that can really like psychologically help with making you seem like unique and distinct.
Okay, Ava's question. As a second speaker, how do you decide when to do a horizontal or vertical extension?
I think you can decide based off of there's this like I don't know if like everyone here is familiar, but there's this other debate format that's way more chaotic. It's called BP, it's called British Parliamentary, and it's basically like eight people in a debate, and your whole team is like the first government or the first. It's just really complicated, but it's like sort of a similar situation. So how I decide is it's just like the urgency of things, like are the two debaters on the other team enough of a threat to your case that like you should prioritize responding to them and putting out new material, or is the original claim of your partner good enough but you just like want to add more onto it and like respond in a way that's like very similar to that line. So I think it's also about how close you want to stick to the original line of like argumentation that your partner is giving, versus you feeling like you can come up with like a new and unique way to respond to it that also sufficiently deals with like your opponent's arguments.
Yeah, okay. Next, a question from our Nav. What are one of the best techniques that you use to make a big impact in a debate or speech?
Ooh, okay. So in terms of content, I think like how you make a big impact is I know this sounds really intuitive, but like impacting. Like you need to dedicate a section of your speech where you literally go like, this argument is important because it affects a lot of people. This argument is important because it is way more likely to come true. This argument is true because it is like more important because it is way more urgent. Just like even if it's just one sentence, like saying that helps. And in terms of like a memory impact, like on the judge, in terms of how memorable your speech is, I think something that you can do is like um like use a very similar opening. I think like as your partner, because that's something that I did is like I sort of coordinated with my partner across all the rounds, and then like their closing line would be my opening line. So like the judge is like, oh, like you've picked up where they left off, and that's like always a nice thing.
Okay, next question. Um, Carissa has her hand raised, so do you want to ask directly?
Oh yeah, sure. Which aspects would you focus on while you prep or do research for more niche motions?
Ooh, okay. So I think because you don't like you don't really know what like how niche a motion is going to get before the tournament, what I do is like I just try to make sure my general knowledge base is like is pretty broad. And I also try to practice with some funky motions once in a while as well. So I would say read the news, definitely be up to date on current events. But like outside of that, I am kind of chronically online. So I'm really up to date on pop culture stuff. So I guess if you don't want to do that, just like have a friend who's like very chronically online give you like a debrief on like major celebrity scandals that have happened recently.
Yeah, okay. Nicholas.
Yeah, my question is, since WIDPIS is like kind of branded as an individual competition, how do you balance collaboration with your partner and debate with like personal strategy? Because I've like heard sometimes that like someone told me like they try to like grief their partner. Like how do you manage that dynamic?
I think okay, I think firstly, um okay, so here's what I would say. I think like you should like talk to your partner and be nice to them and all that. But if they are like if they ever cross any boundaries with you, you like also need to have some respect for yourself. Like you need to be like, okay, look, like you have been acting like kind of weird and I don't think that's appropriate. Like you need to say that and you need to make it really clear that you are not to be shoved around just because you are a competitor. Like does not mean that you deserve to be disrespected. Um, I would say I think like if you are scared of like your partner like stealing your arguments and stuff like that, um, you can like try and like I don't know like see what they're writing. I just think that it never goes well when you're plotting against your partner because you tend to focus so much on them like if you're just like plotting the downfall of your partner that you forget to actually debate the debate, right? There's like even though you are still technically competing against your partner, the more immediate priority is to like sort of outweigh your opponents because that is how a debate works. I think in terms of like doing better than your partner, if you want to do that in terms of rankings, like things like like personal style and things like the depth of your reasons are at the end of the day the things that will put you above them, not like necessarily how unique your claim is and stuff like that. And I think when it comes to that, you can you can choose to, obviously if you're not comfortable sharing everything that you're saying, you don't have to do that. But like at the same time, I do think that in terms of like at least the rough argument that you are saying, I think those are things that should be like transparent. And again, like be very clear with your boundaries. And if they are crossed, like do not be afraid to, call your own partner out.
Yeah, for sure. Um, Next question from the chat. What are some phrases you often use in debates to sound more persuasive?
Ooh, okay. So I like to say like even if in their very best case. So that is like a lot of like words that's like, okay, I'm giving them the huge benefit of the doubt here. So that's like a bunch of phrases that I've sort of like made into like a Frankenstein of charitable debating. Yeah, so like even if in the very best case, blah, 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 that's something I like to say. I also like to say, like the I like to talk about like the spirit of the debate sometimes. I think don't overuse this definitely because it's only applicable in cases where you feel like they're not debating what you think this topic is like supposed to be about. Yeah, and what else? Like this is not a phrase. I just like to use a little bit of like alliteration in my opening lines if possible. Yeah.
Okay. Next question in the chat. How did you practice and gain experience in debate?
Honestly, I think that like there's like two ways to do this, right? One is just by going to practice debates over and over and over again. Another one is to go to competitions. I think as much as possible, like competitions are definitely like a different type of helpful from practice because I think when you practice with the same people and you sort of get used to it. So I think as much as possible, try to attend like competitions. You know, if you don't want to travel and go through all that, if you don't have that much time, try to find some online ones or some like local ones that you can go to. Um, and I think also in terms of practicing, one thing that you can do, even on your own, if like you don't want to spend too much time, you can literally go online and like look at really good debate speeches from like world schools, for example, if you're like targeting your reasoning, and then you pretend you are in the debate. You pretend you are debating this person, and that's going to be really like intimidating at times because there's like YouTube videos where like the speech is really fire, but I think if you try to put yourself into the debate instead of just observing the debate, that also helps like challenge yourself a lot.
Yeah, okay. Next question. How do you juggle the preparation between debate categories and other public speaking categories like inter, persuade, impromptu, all the while for WIDPSC? And what is your advice to be super all-rounded in all these categories? Because, I mean, to my knowledge, you did break for like one or two other categories, right? So how do you do that?
So basically, I think um like at first I was really bad at this. At first I was only in it for like debate. And then I gradually like after being in the audience for some of the other events, I was like, whoa, that is really cool. So I started like liking it as well. I think my number one advice is to like make sure that you like your piece. Like for persuasive, I think, or like after dinner or interp, those prepared pieces. I think it helps if you naturally like your piece so that you are not like, oh, like now I have to do this event, which I hate. It helps a lot if you have a piece that you like. Um, Also, I think if you are juggling like a few different events, try to have some like there are some skills that are like hybrid skills that help for multiple of them. So for example, impromptu speaking helps with both impromptu and debate. And I think that like your like style and being persuasive that helps for impromptu, persuasive, and debate as well. And I think like the energy that you get from interp is also good. So I think try to train some of those skills, like try to cross apply some of those skills and like consciously do that. So you are aware that you don't have to do like that much work on it. I think when you want to prioritize things, I think never let it get to the point where you are feeling like you're rusty in any one event if you want to be really well-rounded. I think because you can sort of sense when you're like, okay, I haven't touched this event in a while. So if you want to be like all-rounded in like all four of those categories, that like is like my little bit of advice.
How much time do you devote into debate and public speaking during your middle school and high school years? Like perhaps how many hours per week do you put into debate and public speaking?
So leading up to WIDPSC, what I did was I had like practice session like once a week, but it was 2 hours. So I think what you can do is like in order to not like fall behind, I think is in between you will have a lot of like passive work that's not necessarily like explicitly practice sessions where you're just like writing out, typing out your speeches and stuff like that. I think something that really helps is to like make sure you have a good timeline for that. Because I've been the person who memorizes their persuasive the lunch before, and it did not turn out well for me. So don't be like that.
Okay. When you're in a debate, which type or style of speaker do you find the hardest to rebut?
I think the hardest to rebut, hands down, is the speaker that does not know what they're talking about, but is so confident that like, and they have like impeccable style, but their like argument is not like, like structurally sound. Because when someone comes up here with like a whole ton of anecdotes and like a whole bunch of rhetoric, and like everyone in the room is like smiling and nodding, and then you go up there and you go like, oh, it's not mutually exclusive. Like it's like you're trying to win on a technicality. That's like really hard to do. So then you have to have both style and substance. So I think the really stylish speaker that also like, you know, has like very limited debate experience is actually, you would think that the people with the least debate experience in a public speaking tournament would be like, the people who are like easier to rebut, but that is actually opposite of the case.
Yeah. Okay. Do we have any more questions? If so, we can put them in the chat or speak up. And if not, then yeah, I think we can conclude this session. So thank you so much for being here with us, Caridee. I think we all got a lot out of it. I personally learned a lot more. And oh, oh, never mind. Sorry, I thought we had a question. Yeah, we hope we're able to do this again. Like maybe we can do another um episode with you for in like a more like niche part or like a specific part of debate. But yeah, thanks for being here with us today.